Okay, I'll just make a very quick introduction. I was very pleased to hear in the plenary Kevin Yang was talking about some of the problems that large language models have in presenting thematic progression. So it only says that we actually are trying to answer a very specific question. What we've come up with, or rather Emmanuel came up with during our classes, is that by trying to answer the question of how students follow a story, an essay, or anything written through the thematic progression. While large language models can produce individual discourse markers, connections, they can't really link the theme to the ream. Emmanuel is a coder, so someone who's manages the dark arts, and quite interestingly, picked up the intricacies of thematic progression a lot quicker than I will ever pick up how to use AI. But just before handing over, I would like just to get everyone to contribute and put in the chat, because we'll be talking specifically about agentic AI. And I would like to ask everyone if you could just write into the chat, what are your institution's policies on agentic AI? And then we can have a look at this, because I know there are very different approaches. So without any more ado, I'll pass over to Emmanuel.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you for everything, and for the smooth introduction. And I'd like to begin by discussing the problem that underpins this project. As Robert earlier said, we'll be talking about enhancing thematic progression and cohesion in EAP, academic writing, scaffolding through agentic AI. So the general problem, let me go to the next slide. The general problem is with generative AI tools such as ChatGPT. They are excellent at producing fluent and convincing text. However, they primarily predict what word or sentence should come next, rather than reasoning about the overall structure of the academic argument. So, as a result of this, longer pieces of writings and can suffer from thematic drift, which is a problem, logical inconsistency, and loss of authorship in general. So, in other words, while writing may appear coherent at a sentence level, the overall argument can gradually lose focus and direction at the end of the day. So, as one of my sources and colleagues suggested, his name is Joe. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Veldi. He suggested that generative AI generates text rather than reasoning about the objectives behind that text. This creates a gap, particularly in academic writing, where maintaining a clear and consistent line of argument is very, very essential. So, why thematic progression matters? To understand why this matters, we need to consider thematic progression. Thematic progression refers to how ideas are introduced, developed, and connected through a piece of writing. It plays a central role in creating cohesion and coherence, to be very, very honest. While thematic progression is effective, readers can follow the writer's argument clearly from one idea to the next. When it breaks down, arguments can become fragmented, difficult to follow, and less persuasive, I think. Yeah, persuasive. So this is particularly relevant for EAP students at foundation and pre-sessional levels who faces challenges in maintaining a clear thematic flow across extended academic texts. So for these students, thematic drift can significantly affect the quality and clarity of their work. So this leads us to agentic AI in general. So unlike traditional generative AI, which focuses on predictive text, agentic AI is designed to work towards a specific objective. So it can evaluate decisions, plan actions, and provide guidance based on an intended goal, unlike generative AI that creates. Let me narrow it down to EAP that when students feeds these generative AI contents, it tends to just predict the next valuable word and the next valuable content that the student needs to use for their piece of work in general. So, like I said, it evaluated the agentic AI system, if instructed properly, evaluates decisions, plan actions, and provide guidance based on an intended goal. In context of our project, the objective is not to generate academic writing for students. Instead, it is to support, like from the topic scaffold, it is to support students in developing and refining their own writing. So by using okay, I'll come back to that when I introduce the current prototype that we are working on. So as shown on the slide, the generative AI produces text output, whereas agentic AI supports the process. So when you give agentic AI a clear-cut instruction that you are supposed to follow this, say for example, you give it an instruction not to generate text, it follows that clear-cut instruction. Rather than replacing the writer, it acts as a scaffold that encourages reflection and improvement. So where can agentic AI provide meaningful support? There's a question asked, well, that the little research I've made, question that people tend to ask: where can agentic AI actually provide meaningful reports? So we have identified three key areas where these agentic AI can provide meaningful support. The first is thematic introduction, which concerns how ideas are initially introduced and framed within a text. So secondly, the second one is how thematic it's about thematic development, which involves how those ideas which you've generated, which you've initially introduced, are sustained, connected, and expanded throughout sentences and paragraphs, not just sentences and at the end of the day losing their connection when it expands to a very large piece of work. So the third area is logical semantic relationship. So this refers to how claims are linked through evidence and contrast and elaboration. So at these points, agentic AI could analyze a student's draft and provide targeted feedbacks aimed at improving cohesion and maintaining thematic consistency instead of losing its purpose when it comes to a certain stage. Let's say, for example, your introduction tells a whole clear-cut story about how certain about how your topic is supposed to follow and how your topic is supposed to relate with its conclusion. But getting to the conclusion, it tells a whole different story from the introduction and from every paragraph of the introduction to the research methodology, if you understand what I mean. So going to the prototype, to explore this concept further, we developed a prototype. And like Patrick, Robert previously said, I have a background in software engineering, and I spun up a very little prototype, which actually supports the idea that this can actually be possible. This idea of scaffolding and providing a proper thematic progression to students' drafts can actually be possible. If you can actually see this prototype clearly, it's a screenshot of what I took from the software. And there is a draft there, a fresh draft there. I named the draft fresh, and it's a little bit a body of work that I presented actually in school. So it pinpoints how the theme and the theme of the first sentence flows into the rim of the second sentence, creating a proper cohesive and proper cohesion to whoever is reading this body of work. Now, this prototype is not just going to be addressing, because you don't just build the software and yes, it's good to build a software and focus it on one general central idea, but there are other features that needs to be plugged into the system. And this prototype actually analyzes, not just analyzing drafts, it tells the students where discourse markers are needed to improve these the draft that the student submits. So, for example, I always make this example to everybody that I tend to pitch this prototype to. Let me say, Emmanuel is going to the market. The market is overcrowded. Emmanuel bought apples. So, if you me saying these lines, connected lines of phrase to you, will make absolutely make sense to you, but putting it on the prototype will analyze this line of sentence, this short line of sentence, and it will actually give you directions, scaffold the line of sentence, and tell you using a discourse marker will make it better. So let me rephrase what the system tends to do at the end of the day. Emmanuel is going to the market. The market is overcrowded. However, Emmanuel bought Apple. So using the discourse marker, however, like throws a proper and I don't know the word to use at this point, but it makes the sentence stand out better instead of the piece of phrases that we joined together initially. So the prototype is tended to analyze a student's own draft and identify areas where thematic progression may be weak and where cohesion begins to break down. So not just like I earlier said, not just beginning to break down cohesion and thematic progression. There are other certain features that could be added on the prototype that would make the sentence at the end of the day give the reader a proper understanding of what you are doing in general. So rather than rewriting the students' work, the system provides prompts and guidance that encourages the students to reflect on their own writing and make informed revisions, not generating text for the student. This helps ensure that the student's own idea, voice, and authorship remains central to the writing process. So, to investigate, that's the research approach. To investigate the effectiveness of this approach, we have outlined a research process consisting of several stages. First of all, we aim to identify patterns of thematic progression and cohesion and thematic drifts within academic writing, EAP academic writing for students. So, secondly, we aim to examine university resources through the prototype, academic literatures, and relevant research corpus to identify effective strategies that support cohesion in general. So we will then map key intervention points where AI guidance could provide meaningful support during the entire writing process. So finally, we will evaluate the prototype's potential to help EAP students produce writing that is more coherent, logically connected, and academically effective. So, addressing the risk, while the potential benefits are significant, it's equally important to consider the risk. Yeah, the previous presenter was talking about some implications to the use of AI in general, and one of the concern is authorial voice. Students may become reliant on AI suggestions and begin to depend on systems rather than developing their own academic style. And another concern is what researcher refers to as human on learning. Over a reliance on AI support may gradually reduce a student's ability to write independently over time. However, for this reason, our approach is intentionally pedagogical rather than generative. So the aim is for students, is not to write for students actually. Instead, the aim is to encourage reflection, critical thinking, and the development of independent writing skills. So, having discussed both the opportunities and the potential challenges, I will now hand over to Patrick, who will explore the pedagogical implications of this work and what it may mean for EAP practice. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I think I need to move to the next slide slightly, but yeah, just give you an introduction. Yes, here we go. Just give you an introduction. Yes, I'm the current EAP and study skills lead at our college, but my background is actually in student support, working with students from the neurodiverse background. And so I was very interested when Emmanuel brought this work to us, because I think it has significant implications for the way that we as practitioners operate, because particularly in terms of assessment, because I think that currently there is a perception of students perceive assessment as a problem, something that they see it as a challenge. Okay, I need to solve this, and therefore there must be an answer. So 1 + 1 = 2. How do I get to 2? And they're using AI, for example. They're using learned language models as a tool to get that, to actually produce an answer. But what we need them to move towards, and perhaps what we as practitioners need to see, is that AI is actually more a facilitator. It is a partner or a collaborator on that journey towards a solution, that there is no fixed answer, that 1 + 1 does not necessarily have to equal 2. It's not about getting to 2. It's about the journey of how you actually get there. And that's what I think this model that we are developing, that Emmanuel has developed, could actually be really useful for, particularly in terms of neurodiverse students, because quite often, in my experience, the students that I have worked with, and indeed this refers to international students as well, is that they're not always, or they can't quite see the journey they have to take. It's quite easy to explain to them, perhaps in a very simple or quite easy way of, okay, so this is how you write, this is what we expect, this is the standard structure of, say, an academic paragraph. But for students who may learn in a particular different way, may come from a different culture, or indeed may feel themselves not engaging with that standard practice, they need more support. They need to continually have this bounce back and this collaboration. And that's where I think AI can step in, and we can move students towards that collaboration, as opposed to seeing it as okay, I simply ask it for an output, generate me a paragraph, it spits out a paragraph. It could actually be more of a collaboration, like, okay, what do you think of this? Well, I think this is good, but have you considered this? And they're engaging in a dialogue. And I've found that students, particularly neurodiverse students, but again, international students, benefit from that dialogue, benefit from that conversation, to actually understand how their argument is being developed. And for us as EAP practitioners, I think then we could design assessments more to be an evaluative process rather than fixed on the production of a product at the end. Rather than thinking about the end game and, okay, the student has actually produced an essay, we could involve ourselves in the development of such a model as the one that Emmanuel is suggesting. And we could design assessments which are more project-based. And this ties into things like graduate attributes and employability as well, because students going out into the workplace are more likely, rather than think, okay, generate or produce an essay or produce a single piece of work at the end, they're going to be more required to work on a project, a long-term project, similar to a dissertation that we would do at university. But this is the kind of thing they do in work. And so engaging in this process, this cognitive thinking process, as early as they can, perhaps through university, throughout their assessments, would then prepare them more effectively for the workplace. We're fulfilling that role then of actually making them more complete graduates, more effective graduates at the end of this. And I think then they would have more self-actualization, sort of quote from sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that idea of they would actualize themselves as, this is what I've produced, not simply, okay, I've come out of my course, I've created an essay, but what does it mean? They'll see this process Well, I started with an idea, then I asked a question, and then I went back and forth, and then we redrafted, and then we created, and then at the end of this, I've created this thing. And that sense of pride, that sense of awareness of themselves would then be, I think, far more beneficial for them as students. And this is what we're thinking about. This is where I think EAP can move into this. I think time's up. Oh, I'm very sorry for that.
Don't worry, it's fine. You've got a minute or two. I didn't realise it would be quite